welcome back to On Texas Football. Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream here at On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, been out for a few days, but I am back with the normal Wednesday crew. Love my Wednesday crew. He is, as Rod Babers calls him, the young prodigy here at On Texas Football. He is CJ Vogel. CJ, how are you on a Wednesday night?
We're doing well, ready to sit down, talk about the schedule, and then watch the Knicks and the Spurs.
Hell yes. CJ's in his domicile, not in his domicile. He's on location tonight, that being the third member of our team, last but definitely not least, lifetime Longhorn 2005 national champion Marcus Myers. Marcus, I don't want to dox you, but you want to give any hints as to where you're at right now?
Man, I'm on Matthew's time zone. We'll give him that. And I've been out at some Little League baseball fields, but with all the scuttlebutt with Texas Tech these days, I figure I'd rep for the back-to-back champs real quick and talk about something that's meaningful. Looking forward to diving into the schedule and happy to be back with you fellas.
Cisco Diaz. Cisco, thank you for the super chat. By the way, line it up in the chat, questions, comments, whatever you got, we'll take it. Super chats, as always, jumped at the front of the line. That's why Cisco's first. So I got my national championship shirt in today. I was wondering, did you order the softball shirt and it came in, or did you pre-order for baseball? I don't know. We're not getting into that, but whatever the case. And we'll probably most likely for tomorrow night for the Thursday live stream, I'll be in for Rod Babers tomorrow with the rest of the winning drive crew, that being CJ and the coach Bob Shipley. We'll have more on baseball going into the weekend tomorrow. But tonight, guys, we're not talking about hypotheticals. We're not talking about anything else. I don't know about y'all. I'm tired of hearing about, talking about, thinking about, hearing anybody say their opinions about Texas Tech. I'm ready to talk Longhorn football, and we get to talk Longhorn football because the SEC announced the television windows for the remaining games that didn't already have assigned windows. And huge shout out to Matthew behind the scenes. I always say Matthew's the MVP that on Texas Football. Matthew is making this graphic on the fly. So if you want to know, hey, what does the schedule look like right now? You don't have to wonder. Matthew's got it laid out there for you. CJ, I'll start with you. What is the most disappointing aspect of this schedule, and why is it that the Tennessee game is an 11 o'clock kick?
Yeah, that's exactly the most disappointing part of it. There were two games, really, that Texas fans, I think everywhere, maybe even fans in both college universities, fans of those schools, fans of the sport, had circled and said, hey, I want to see this game between Texas and LSU and Texas and Tennessee at night. I want to see Texas walk into Neyland Stadium. I want to see Texas walk into Tiger Stadium and play them under the lights. Well, we might get that with LSU, but we won't get that at Tennessee on week 4. That will be an 11 a.m. kickoff. So, look, I think there's two train of thoughts here. One, you might be a little happy if you're a Texas fan sitting here saying, hey, it won't be at night. They won't have all day to pregame and get excited and use the atmosphere to their advantage. And then there's the college football truther that just says, yeah, but this sucks. You want to play this under the lights. You want all the glitz, the glamour. But, again, that flex time with LSU is still one that I'm looking at saying it better be at night, or else college football will have gotten robbed.
Marcus, there's a couple things here. This is kind of still the Fox stench that's on this a little bit, because this is exactly the way I felt about the Michigan and Ohio State games the last 2 years. I'm like, well, it's probably good for Texas that it's an 11 a.m. kick. But other than that, it sucks because I really wanted to see those atmospheres at night. I really wanted a night game at Neyland Stadium. Marcus, you and I are the same age. In the early to mid-'90s when I started watching college football. So in my mind, when I think of Tennessee, it's Phil Fulmer, it's Peyton Manning, T. Martin, Peerless Price, like old school Tennessee winning a BCS title. That to me, like when the Tennessee-Florida game was the game of the year, that to me is Tennessee. I wanted that. We're not going to get that. We'll get into the rest of the schedule, Marcus, but I just want your thoughts on Tennessee. Probably good for Texas in the grand scheme of things, but I think just disappointing because that should have been a night game.
Yeah, I had that one pegged as a night game for sure. I think I've mentioned to you before, Jeff, I got a buddy that played at Tennessee in the 90s with Peyton Manning. So I'm planning on trying to get to the game with him. And I just knew it was going to be a night game. We were going to have time to kind of take in the sights and stuff earlier in the day. Looks like, the TV networks had other plans for us. So, I think you and CJ nailed it, right? It's kind of boomerang back and forth. So you had the Michigan game early, played really well. Ohio State game was a little more sluggish. So hopefully it boomerangs back this way again. And they can kind of have a Michigan-type performance against Tennessee. But I was definitely looking forward to that one being a night game for sure.
CJ, let's talk about Red River because Texas, they'll play Tennessee, then they get the bye, and then the OU game starts 8 consecutive weeks. And I saw somebody mention this thread over on TexasFootball.com, which we had a running thread during the schedule reveal show. I don't know if this is a fact, but it sounds like maybe the 2:30 window is going to be the permanent window for Texas OU going forward. Again, we know it's either going to be 11 o'clock or 2:30. It'll never be an evening or a night game as long as it's at the Cotton Bowl. I've got no complaints with Texas OU at 2:30. I'm completely fine with that window.
Yeah, I think it might be here to stay, to which I think a year ago, whenever it was first introduced, or I guess reintroduced, I kind of sat here and said I didn't like it. I kind of fell in love with the 11 a.m. aspect of it. Just get up and get ready to go. There's something about, a 9 a.m. wax beer with a corn dog to kind of start your day. I love that part of it. I was swayed pretty heavily by that game a year ago at 2:30. And again, I know some of the older folks, sit here and say, hey, well, that's the time it should have always been at. I wasn't a part of that. But I like it now. And I do think 2:30 is a great kickoff time for it. If you've been to that game, you know it's going to be hot. It will always be a scorching hot day. Even when it's cloudy, even when it's rainy, you're going to sit there and say, gosh, I should have drank another water or two, because that's just how that stadium, that fair, that atmosphere is. So, yeah, 2:30 I think is fine. I think, again, Jeff, you nailed it. It'll never be under the lights. But the more shade you can kind of garner in that stadium, I think the better for everybody.
Yeah, Marcus, I don't know if you've got a preference on that game being at 11 o'clock or 2:30, which I think when you were at Texas, you were part of both windows. It'd be in the morning or the afternoon. You got a preference one way or the other?
I think as a fan, I like it at the 2:30. You don't have to get up as early. You can kind of roll into it a little easier. And it feels like by kickoff, everybody's kind of into it. When those 11 o'clock kicks are, it just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel the same. And Sandman, he hit a sensitive spot for me there in the chat. He says, park in Deep Ellum, what can go wrong? I didn't park in Deep Ellum last year. I parked downtown right by a Marriott, thinking everything was going to be great, and came out after celebrating the win, and somebody had busted the windows out of my truck. So that part was not fun, but the game was amazing. So I'm glad that it's at that time, and I suspect it'll be at that time for the foreseeable future. If at some point down the road both teams kind of crater or something and have some wonky schedules, then maybe they move it to an 11 a.m. But if they're what they're supposed to be, in the coming years, I can't see them moving it off of that 2:30 slot.
CJ, you remember the year? It was 2016, so it was Charlie Strong's last Texas OU game. Texas had the Fox deal, but because I want to say it was an ALCS or maybe a World Series game that was on, so they put it at 11 on FS2. Like when Texas, you got the FS2 treatment. I'm like, yeah, neither one of these schools is going to be much longer for this conference if they have anything to say about it. And it turns out, less than a decade later, here we are, both are in the SEC. But I can't believe we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of that. But I don't know. As long as it's not ever going to be on FS2 again, I'll take whichever window we're talking about.
Speaking of TV channels, I think this is something that Texas fans should be pleased with. It probably will be used in a way for a recruiting pitch, maybe not as much in today's day and age, but you look at 4 of the first 5 games of the year, ESPN ABC, ESPN ABC, ESPN ABC. So you like that, right? You like the idea of playing prime time on a national stage on channels that everybody in the country will get. So that's another reason why you sit here and you say, hey, as long as the channel is there, as long as the broadcast is there, you can throw that game at either time. And you know that there's probably going to be a major college football show on scene, given where Texas and Oklahoma will be ranked coming into the season and likely coming into week 6 on October 10th.
Yeah. A couple of things here. By the way, I was wrong. It was FS1, not FS2. So my bad. I don't want to mean to disparage any of the Fox, cable networks. But All Right Cube, I just want to get this out of the way because All Right Cube said throwing shade at South Dallas. I'm not throwing shade at South Dallas. I'm throwing shade at the fact that you cannot let these two fan bases that already hate each other. You can't get everybody all day to just partake in wax cups at the state fair, kick that thing off at sundown, and just expect everything to just be all fine and dandy. Like it'll never happen just because of the safety concern. It has nothing to do with the environment. It has everything to do with 200. Oh, I love Oak Cliff. It's like 200,000 people, probably more than half of them inebriated. Like, what could go wrong at nighttime in Dallas? So yeah, that's why. Marcus, we do have a question though. I believe Marco had it, if I can find it. Marco was wondering about call times. He was wondering about call time. Yeah, so Marcus, what was the wake up call time for the team for OU? And band, we had 5 a.m. wake up times for 11 a.m. games. Just curious what it was for the players.
Man, it's a good question. It was probably, if it wasn't that, it wasn't far off. It was probably between like 5 and 6 because you're typically at the stadium 2 to 3 hours before the game. You got to get your pregame meal in. You have walkthroughs and stuff. So it's pretty close to that, Marco. I'll probably have to go back and look and see if I can find, one of those old, call sheet kind of things that gave our schedule. But I think you're pretty close to it. If it wasn't 5, it wasn't too far after.
So I forgot. I'm gathering my bearings. I've been out. I went down to the coast with the family for a couple of days. Came back with a nice sunburn, so I'm getting my bearings back together. I forgot Wednesdays is the Sandman Silver Spurs Sicko chat. Those two guys are running the chat. So
yeah, pretty much.
Just taking me a minute to scroll through some things, but we'll get to the rest of the day. I want to get to some questions though. Yes, OU sucks. CJ, are you still eating Fletcher's corn dogs for breakfast at Red River? If you're not eating Fletcher's corn dogs for breakfast, what the hell's wrong with you? CJ, I think
you're muted.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Sorry about that. Matthew just gave me a bad look. Sorry, Matthew. And I probably shouldn't follow it up with this story, but I think last year when we had the on-scene show, the pregame show at the State Fair with Jerry and Bobby before the game, I walked over with the Fletcher's corn dog, and I think it was one of those lemonade with the fun juice in it, one of those ices, basically. And Bobby looked at me and said, "Dude, it's 9:15. What are you doing?" I'm like, "Bobby, we're at the fair. Come on, let's have some
your
fun."
Point is,
and to which I wasn't even the crazy one in this conversation because I look over and Jerry's, sitting there cracking open the things of mustard and going long way on the hot dog. And I'm like, okay, what are we?
But Jerry didn't have mustard. There's no way Jerry had mustard.
It was mayonnaise. Excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Marcus, you got a Texas OU favorite food. I'm a corn dog guy. Some people are turkey leg guys. Some people wanted, hey, whatever the new fair food is that's fried this year, go try it. You got anything that's a must have when you go to the State Fair?
I'm pretty classic. I just need a corn dog with mustard. I don't get into all the wild antics that Jerry does with the corn dog. So I'm pretty basic there. Here lately, I have been trying, some of the ones that are a little more highly rated. I try to ask my friends in the Dallas area that usually get out to the fair, a day or two before the game, like, hey, what did y'all like? What did you not like? And grab a thing or two. But, I'm not overly adventurous these days. And I want my stomach to, be in good shape for the game. So.
Oh man, I love the Wednesday chat. You guys, it is lively, it is rolling, and we'll get back to the schedule here in just a second. But right now, I got to thank our first sponsor. As a matter of fact, our lead sponsor for the Wednesday night live stream is Andy Ludicky and My Perfect Franchise. Are you stuck in the corporate rat race with 2 weeks PTO and no control over the money you can make or your schedule in general? If that's you, then call Andy. He'll take you through a process to help you find a business that'll fit your skill sets and your financial goals. Franchise ownership is something that's not for everyone, but if you have a desire to take control of your destiny, call Andy or email him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. Again, that's andy@myperfectfranchise.net. And a big shout out to Andy Ludicky and My Perfect Franchise for sponsoring the Wednesday night live stream here on Texas Football. Yes, OU sucks. Marcus wants you to know that Truth Fletcher's added a special mayo spout just for Jerry Hamilton. I cannot confirm or deny that, but there you have it, guys. Let's we can talk about the OU game. I can talk about the OU game all day, but let's look at the rest of the schedule. CJ, the one thing that jumped out to me, I'm not surprised about the flex situation for Ole Miss or LSU. Like we figured, I figured those two games had a pretty good chance. LSU for sure. And then if Tennessee was going to be an 11 o'clock kick, I'm like, well, they got to put Ole Miss in primetime just because of the Manning family angle. Like you want that game in a primo spot. But I'll tell you what, guys, a Halloween night game at home against Mississippi State. Marcus, you were in the program for, I think it was Halloween night. It was the Oklahoma State game back in 2004. Yeah. maybe at this point now an underrated home atmosphere just because everybody was there. Said the state, you can't talk about the whole game because it was 35-14 Oklahoma State at halftime. But people say, hey, the second half of the Oklahoma State game was about as loud as they've ever heard DKR. So CJ, a Halloween night game against Mississippi State. I don't know why. That just I'm down with that.
Yeah, I think that will be a lot of fun for the students, the fan base, everybody that will make the trip over to DKR. Of course, by that point, you should be, completely in the dark, if you will, by sunset, by kickoff. So you should have the drones, you should have all the glitz, the glamour, you should have everything that comes with what CDC and his administration over at Texas has built DKR and night games into be, which of course now we know has been, one, very fun, very entertaining, but two, also a home field advantage. So I think that's fantastic. I think when you look at it, yeah, Texas certainly needed a night home game in the conference. It would have been probably nicer to get a big game. Like, we'll see if that Ole Miss game ends up being at night, so you get back to back. But ultimately, you get Mississippi State, you get them on Halloween. It should be a fun night. I don't think that game will be very high stress, so it should, and more than anything, be a bit of a celebration, if you will.
Yeah, for the record, that Oklahoma State game was November 6th, 2004, so I was off by a couple of days. Point still stands. Marcus, anything home or road jump out to you? And again, just for anybody that's tuning in, we got some of the television windows for the other 8 SEC games. Only Tennessee and OU are locked in terms of the kickoff time, network to be determined whether it's ESPN or ABC for both those games. But we've got television windows for the other 6, and the Ole Miss and LSU games are flexed, which means they could either be in the afternoon window or in the night window. Marcus, anything else jump out to you, good, bad, or indifferent?
Man, I was telling you in our text thread, I was trying to keep up with who is playing the week before they play Texas and what time. And so some of those in the middle, while it was kind of coming out, I lost a little track of. The one I found really interesting, though, is for the most part, teams don't really have anybody challenging the week that they play before us, or at the very least, they're just playing an early game. Well, OU has to play against, or I'm sorry, A&M has to play against OU the week before they play Texas, which I found to be a little interesting. Certainly, I'd rather us be playing Arkansas than, having to face a more challenging opponent, the way that A&M's having to. Now, granted, that's going to be an early game. So as the Arkansas game is kicking off, we'll kind of know what happened in that OU A&M game for the most part. But I found that to be a little interesting, just, kind of the way the scheduling, worked out for them to have that tough of an opponent, even though it's an early game. That's still, certainly something that, I'm going to kind of keep an eye on. And then, that Mizzou game has been the one that I've kind of circled a bit as the one that could be a potential letdown. Now, again, I think I said this earlier before as well, that I did that, prior to Ahmad Hardy, suffering the situation he went through this summer. And so we certainly don't know, what his football shape is going to be like by then, if anything. But that's one of those where, sleepy start, probably a little colder up there in Missouri. And, having a running back, of his stature, if he's able to be full go, one that, could kind of be a bit of a look ahead as, you're looking towards LSU the following week. So that being an early game is certainly one I got my eye on.
Yeah, CJ, all right, Q brings it up. And I love that Marcus hit on this because this is the game that I wanted to talk about. So Mizzou feels like a tricky one, but we're Texas, they're all tricky. CJ, that's one that when we've done our schedule breakdowns here on the channel, that's one everybody's kind of circled as well. Don't really know what they're going to bring to the table, but Drink is a really good coach, and hey, they're at least going to play really good defense and run the football, which that stuff travels. Like it can, they have the chance to shorten the game. Does an 11 a.m. kick change your outlook on that game one way or the other?
It does a little bit. Now, it's going to maybe feel a little strange to say, but if Missouri played on, natural grass, I'd sit here and say, I'm really scared, right? They grow the grass out a week or two, a little bit longer. The Texas sleepwalks in, and then now you're in a sluggish, slow game that plays into their style, which is ground and pound, and let their running game with or without Ahmad Hardy start to work. Now, they don't play on natural grass. So I sit here and I say, all right, that's kind of a factor for me. It sounds crazy, but you look at what Northwestern has done for years and years and years in the Big Ten to be able to kind of hang in some of these big games where they're out athleted from the jump. I look at that with Missouri. Now, there's two things. Do you want to play at night with Missouri where you have the entire day in Columbia to build up, to get ready, to prepare mentally for the game ahead? Probably, but also you deal with the night fans, a Missouri fan base that hates Texas. So I would say no. I do think this is like playing 11 a.m. in Arkansas, in which Texas did in 2024. Will that game go according to plan to Texas? I would argue probably not. Missouri's a talented team. They're very well coached, but it's going to have to take that entire fan base to get up and get ready to roll very early in the morning to give Texas issues on the field. So I think this is, again, anytime that it's not under the lights, anytime you don't get that full feeling of the crowd's impact, I think is a positive for Texas. And, of course, 11 a.m. I think would be preferable.
I love the fact that CB brings up secure the bag, which is that game was the last time Texas and Missouri played each other, which wasn't that a memorable one down in the I think it was the Texas, but yeah, it was the Texas Bowl. I think Academy was the sponsor of that game. That was it was. Look, it tells you what kind of game it was. And granted, Michael Dixon had a hell of a game, but when your punter is the MVP of your bowl game, it kind of tells you what the product was for both offenses in that game. Marcus, as a player on the road, did you have a preference of an 11 a.m. kick, an afternoon or a night?
Man, as you know, Jeff, we were all right, during my years. And so we kind of favored those early games because we got back in town in time and we could apply CJ's marching the 6th Street gift before that was really a thing.
Yeah, no Ubers then. You actually had to march.
Yeah, we had to figure it out. So, there was the e-bus. Some guys took that. In most cases, we just kind of found ways to pile in vehicles. So yeah, we were big fans of the early games, whether they were home or away. If you took care of business, you could have a good night out afterwards.
Yeah, CJ, on the Missouri game, again, that's one that we've kind of talked about. Has there been any update on the Ahmad Hardy situation? I haven't heard anything.
No, the last I've heard was Drinkwitz during SEC spring meetings saying, hey, we're going to take this day by day. We will obviously be very cautious and slow with Ahmad so we don't rush him back in. Of course, that's a very severe situation that he suffered from. It was a gunshot wound. So, again, you don't really toy around with those kind of situations when it's borderline life or death or could have been life or death. So right now, get him to fall camp and then just ease him in. By this point of the year, if he's medically cleared, if he's ready to go, I would expect to see Ahmad Hardy as a big-time player in this game. Yeah,
so that was I think Drake said something to the effect of, hey, we're not even at the point where we're even thinking about the football stuff right now. He's just recovered. Okay. Last question, CJ, I want to throw this to you. And again, if you got questions in the chat, line them up. We'll get to a super chat, jump to the front of the line. I just look at where that Arkansas game is positioned between LSU and A&M. But, man, I may be shortchanging Arkansas. I don't know. New head coach, a lot of new stuff in Fayetteville. I just can't see Arkansas, CJ, putting it together to really give Texas the kind of fight that would push, especially on senior day. Like I don't know. It's just where that game was positioned. If you flip-flop the Missouri and Arkansas games on the schedule, I'd be way more concerned about Missouri. But I don't know, man. I respect where Arkansas is on the schedule. I just can't bring myself to think like that'll be this game that is going to be a trap game where it's in the fourth quarter. We're like, oh my gosh, how is Texas in a one possession game with Arkansas?
I think the benefit of this is getting it at home, right? Now splitting at LSU and at Texas A&M could be a spot where, hey, you're coming off of a very emotional game and you're looking ahead for a very emotional game. Does that play a factor? It's not under the lights. It's not first thing in the morning, so you'll have some time to sit there and think about it. But I just don't know. I don't believe right now that Arkansas will have the talent to hang in there with Texas. It's something that, obviously we saw this past year when the two teams played. That game wasn't very close for the first three quarters. Texas was already throwing in some 2s and 3s and 4s to get some reps to, again, look out and ahead to Texas A&M. to get into the college football playoff. Now that game got maybe a little closer than it should have been, but point being, that's kind of the talent discrepancy that I'm seeing right now between the two programs. And even with, I think you could throw Arkansas at any point in this schedule, and I think the outcome should be the same. So it should be a Texas win by 10 to 20 points, in my opinion. Probably should be more if they're really clicking by the end of it. That first year for Silverfield over at Arkansas, I think it's going to be a rocky road. They just don't have it yet, despite KJ Jackson, I think, having a good shot at maybe surprising some folks.
Yeah, Marcus, NIL and Repshire said no surprise loss to Arkansas like 2003, Jeff. Look, with all due respect to the Hogs, Cedric Cobbs, Matt Jones, Jason Peters, Sean Andrews, they are not walking through that door on November 21st.
Yeah, Matt Jones isn't walking through that door, and it's not, an opponent that you don't regularly face. If I remember correctly, that game was earlier in the year since, we were in the Big 12 at the time. So that was a September game. It was an early kick and, one that just it caught us off guard quite a bit. I think by this point in the schedule, you'll have so much film on them. And to CJ's point, I just don't think they have enough. And so when you're looking at kind of the battle of attrition at that point, that's what game 8 for them and us as well in the SEC. I feel a little bit better about, what the talent level that Texas is going to be bringing to the table. And then even the ability to lean on some of your depth to kind of get, your starters ready for the following week if need be. So.
Good stuff. All right. Rocky P's got a schedule related super chat. Thank you, Rocky P, for the super chats as always. So Florida lost last year. Silver lining. Florida is positioned after OU. Easy letdown game potential, but I doubt that happens after last year. CJ, I given some of the stuff, like if you pick up bits and pieces of some of the stuff Sark has said, plus I think adding Jabbar Jalouk and Billy Gonzalez to the staff, that's going to be a game where it's nothing against John Summerall if Sark just decides to take out a year's plus worth of frustration on Florida, if he can, on October 17th.
If he can, that's going to be the big point here, because I do think Florida is very talented. They're very physical on both sides of the offensive and defensive lines. I think they're skills players, especially offensively. I think you could say rivals that of maybe anybody in the SEC. I don't know. I don't think that's crazy to say. You had Eric Singleton, a very talented, one of the faster players in the country from Auburn. Obviously, Dallas Wilson, Texas saw firsthand what he's able to do when healthy. And then, of course, Wilson's very talented, Eugene Wilson, that is, and Jaden Ball. Again, Texas fans know how talented he is. So that 4, I think, is very, very difficult to defend against, especially if you don't bring it physically like Texas did not a year ago. If Texas gets up, if Texas is able to take care of business at home, yeah, Jeff, I think Sark's sitting there saying, we're getting our get back in this game, right? We're going to run this up the same way Texas did when it was 42-0 at halftime, essentially in 2024, right? So can they do it? We'll see. If they're able to do it, they absolutely will.
That was just a sad display when it was, I think it was 42-0 at that point, and Billy Napier kicked the field goal just to avoid the shutout. I'm like, man, Steve Spurrier's got to be like throwing up watching this game, just watching Florida.
Visors left and right, Jeff.
No doubt. But Marcus, man, to CJ's point about Florida, until Florida gets on an upward trajectory, I feel like when I talk about Florida, I feel like how all the other Big 12 media talked about Texas in the Tom Herman, Charlie Strong days. Hey, yes, they might not have a great record, and people might say, "Oh, how are you in a game with Texas?" Yeah, that's still a team with a crap load of guys that are really talented and a lot of NFL players on that team. They just may not have put it all together, but that's a team that if on a given day, like last year in Gainesville, if they manage to put it together, that's not going to be a game where you can plan on playing your 2s and 3s in the third quarter.
Yeah, and again, when you're looking at the schedule release, I want to say, if I remember correctly, I know for sure they're playing South Carolina the week before. So while we're playing OU, they're playing South Carolina, who I don't suspect puts up a ton of a fight, right? So you would think that they're going to be able to kind of come into the following week with that game circled and looking to make, the best performance possible. So it's certainly, one that you can't take lightly, but I am glad that it's a home game. Would have preferred it to be in, either later in the afternoon or evening. So, the fellas will certainly have to bring it that day.
All right, we'll keep talking about the schedule. We got a couple schedule-related super chats to get to on the other side, but right now I want to thank another one of our sponsors here on the Wednesday night live stream, and that is Prize Picks. This edition of On Texas Football, the Wednesday night live stream, is brought to you by Prize Picks. We're in the dog days of summer, which means it's getting hotter outside, and we're turning up the heat across all sports. Basketball playoffs are red hot, baseball's in full swing, and Prize Picks adds more fun to your favorite sports. Now, every possession, every at-bat, it all matters. You're locked in from start to finish, and you're not just watching anymore. You got a little juice in it. And the best part about Prize Picks is it's easy. You're just picking more or less on player stats. It's all you got to worry about. Just build your lineup, submit it, and you're good to go. It takes about a minute to go through the process, and you can go across multiple sports if you want, or just stick to one and write it out. Whatever's on, it's going to work. Today, Prize Picks has a special on Victor Wembanyama. He needs just 32.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. So we're locked in on that, going more than 32.5 points, rebounds, and assists on Wemby. We're also taking Jalen Brunson to have more than 1.5 3-pointers made, and Dylan Harper to have more than 3.5 rebounds. We're trusting our gut, and that's exactly what you do when you're dealing with Prize Picks. You make your pick, you lock it in. Now, every single moment actually means something. Prize Picks is available in all 50 states, including right here in the great state of Texas. So if you haven't jumped in yet, now's the time. Just download the Prize Picks app, use the code HMA, play $5, and they'll give you $50 in lineups instantly. Again, the code is HMA. 5 get you 50. It's that simple when you download the Prize Picks app. And as always, please remember to play smart, play responsibly, play Prize Picks. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get to the couple of schedule-related super chats. Rocky, thank you for the super chat. Mellow7969 says UF is the trap game for Texas. In between Oklahoma and Ole Miss, no bye week either. That 3-game stretch will be tough, but all games are at home. CJ, for the same reasons I just told Marcus, my level of respect for Florida as a program, I can't use the words Florida and trap game together. That may be naive of me. I just refuse to do it.
Yeah, I think you're right, especially coming off of what we saw a year ago in the swamp. And, and I think Mello brings up a good point here is, hey, 3-game stretch, no bye week. But that's your entire schedule from week 4 on, right? You get that bye week in week 5, and boom, you got 8 straight SEC contests. And that final month, you get 3 of which on the road. So if Torrey Beckton aren't sitting here in summer conditioning saying, hey, it's fourth quarter time, late in the season, you got to pick it up today, June 10th, in summer conditioning, I think they're going about this all wrong. But knowing Torrey Beckton and the guys that he has under his staff, I think they're going to be okay. He does a fantastic job with the way that Texas goes about strength and conditioning, but they're going to have to bring it because this is the new life of SEC football with 9 conference games. You don't get a bye week or a second bye week. So buckle up. That'd be my message.
Marcus, I want to get your thoughts on this because I've said this before. Texas might have the most talented roster in the SEC. Georgia would have something to say about that. You can look at LSU or Ole Miss. There's several teams in that conversation. I just don't think with a 9-game SEC schedule, I don't think the talent disparity is that wide where you can expect somebody to go undefeated. I think there's going to be one game where it's an injury or it's just that day where you play like your C game against somebody playing their A game. The conditions are such that I just can't expect anybody to go undefeated playing a 9-game SEC schedule. Everybody's going to trip up at some point.
Yeah, I would be of the same opinion, Jeff. I think it's just whether it's, like you mentioned, some kind of attrition, an in-game injury. We saw what happened at Vanderbilt, right, where some of the guys were dropping like flies, and it wasn't necessarily detrimental for the length of the season, but it definitely made the end of that game much more interesting than the first 3 quarters of it. And so, that I think things like that are bound to happen, and you just hope that you don't sustain anything that is really going to cost you too heavily. But I would be, pretty shocked myself. It's certainly not something I would, be looking at taking any kind of odds on, that somebody's going to go through the entire SEC schedule unscathed. But, to the super chat point, even about the Ole Miss kind of being the trap game. I mean, it's like CJ said, all these games are going to be consecutive, and everybody's going to be having to, play somebody the week before or looking to someone the week after. I'd much rather have that kind of 3-game stretch at home. And then when you include the OU game, you get the entire month of October this year in the state, as opposed to last year where it was, the opposite. So, I think they'll find a way, to move through it. But ultimately, it's something that every team in the conference is going to have to face. And why you hear, the coaches and the ADs speaking both in, towards the end of the season when it was announced they were moving to a 9-game SEC schedule, and then in the spring meetings. And I suspect it'll be a pretty large topic of conversation when we get to SEC Media Days, of just how challenging that is going to be, for the SEC teams, and for that, something that they're probably going to be championing to be rewarded for when it's all.
Yeah, no doubt. I even look at CJ, like, even, you could say Mississippi State might be a trap game, but again, what happened last year in Starkville, but man, I've trumpeted it all offseason just because I watched him at the end of last year, man. I may be dead wrong, but I think Kamario Taylor is going to be a problem for people in this league with his ability at quarterback, his skill set in Jeff Lebby's offense. They're gonna shot. They will beat somebody that you look on paper that they have no business being. Mississippi State will do that. I hope it's not against Texas, but they're going to win a game that you look on paper that they have no business winning.
Yeah, and I know, look, Brennan Thompson ends up getting drafted. They're still built with a lot of speedy, quick wide receivers that can stretch the field and put a lot of stress on defenses. And if you go back to that first half against Texas a year ago in Starkville, I know it was a different scheme, but there was so much space in that secondary that they could almost have done whatever they wanted, and they did do whatever they wanted against Texas. They've gone out and added Zion Reagans, again, a very quick, speedy wide receiver. But Marquise Johnson coming in from Missouri, 800-yard wide receiver. Again, you pair him up with an Anthony Evans III out of Judson right down the road, who previously was at Georgia. You have plenty of options right now to spread the field and just let Jeff Lebby cook in space. And that's a dangerous thing, regardless of the talent elsewhere. They have a very talented cornerback one. We'll see what that defense looks like, because that, of course, was the big issue a year ago. But they should be able to move the ball. And, I mean, we've talked about it. When you have a quarterback, Jeff, that can run, all he needs to do is have the threat of completing passes down the field in a speedy offense. And those lanes have just become wide open for him to take off and make plays with his legs, like we saw late last year against Ole Miss early on.
All right. Mello, thank you for the super chat. Good stuff, CJ. CJ's Beard has a super chat. And big thank you for the super chat, CJ's Beard. Says, boys, Sark has convinced numerous players to stay on an extra year, improving their draft stock. How much has he made players in NFL dollars? And before we get to that, this is the important part of this two-parter.
Before,
CJ, we need a 30-second update on your quest to find Mrs. Vogel. I'll hang up and listen. So before we talk about how many NFL dollars Sark has made guys that have come back, CJ, is there an update on your quest to find Mrs. Vogel?
Matthew puts me on the big screen. Look, we're looking, we're working, we're making sure that there's options, right? I think that's kind of the big thing. Maybe we have something in the works. Y'all won't know though, but I do know. If there is something in the works, you got to get it done ahead of football season, because then I have to devote all of my time to banning Sandman and blocking Silver Spur Sicko. So right now, we'll see. We'll have an update for you guys in a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully Marco has some advice for you. So swipe right, CJ. So there you go. It's a little advice for you. CJ's Beard, thank you for the super chat. Let's go back to it though. Marcus, the best example of this, Sark benefited and maximized the pandemic year and the extra year of eligibility that guys got back. The best example is probably Jade, but Alfred Collins, look at what coming back another year did for him. I didn't think Vernon Broughton was going to be drafted in the third round. Even you go back to DeMarvion Overshown and Keandre Coburn. There have been a lot of guys. So how much money has Sark made, guys? I mean, Marcus, I said the best example is Jade, because Jade went from not really having a position and getting the feedback, well, the NFL doesn't draft nickels, so maybe he's like a day 3 guy, to being a first-round guy. So we're talking tens of millions of dollars difference for him.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, where I would give Sark the credit is ultimately that, it seems like he's had really good conversations with his players. And regardless of what their decision has been, whether it's been to go to the NFL or stay, to go to the portal or stay, I think he's made it pretty clear where guys are slotted and where, he's getting information, whether it's from his league contacts or what have you, of what their prospects are looking like, right? And then it's on them to, all right, if I choose to come back, what am I going to do with that? And so I think it's a salient point to make, and yet at the same time, it's still, your mileage may vary by the player, right? I mean, if you're not a guy that's like wired like Jade, that's really committed to coming back, and not only just coming back, but I mean, he came back and he switched to Huff's number, right? Like he kind of called this shot. I'm going after the Thorpe, and I want to increase my stock. Well, that only happens if you put in the work in the classroom from a film standpoint. If you do everything you can to prepare your body for the season, you go out and you execute. And so I think it's as much of a testament to what some of those players have been able to do coming back as it is to, what Sark was, I guess, putting them in position to be able to do.
And CJ, I think the premium position conversation has a lot to do with it, because if you look at Trevor Gooseby coming back, Trevor Gooseby could have gone into the draft and maybe he's a late 1, an early 2, maybe a mid 2. I don't know how it would have worked out for him. But if you come back, if you're the first or second tackle taken in the draft, again, you're talking tens of millions of dollars in terms of difference. Whereas like a guy like Anthony Hill, hey, if you're an off-ball linebacker coming out this year, you're an off-ball linebacker coming out next year, it's a position that people don't value. So really, is the 1 year and that loss of earning potential, is it worth it to come back? Maybe for a guy like Anthony Hill, it's not.
Yeah, probably not. Now, for a guy like Malik Muhammad, maybe it is, right? Maybe you do kind of grow into or show off that speed on tape a little bit more, because I believe he ran a 4.42. You just wouldn't have known watching the tape. So, that's another instance where coming back, declaring the 3 and out kind of guys, you'd like to win those battles. But you're right, Jeff. For Anthony Hill, a guy that's off ball, how much more value do you normally gain in a new system? Had he returned, maybe a Muschamp unleashes him to an extent that he wasn't utilized, fully in 2025. So that's kind of the one thing. But, I mean, that's basically based off of, do you fire and hire a brand new defensive coordinator rather than, just staying the course as a player, something that's out of your control. So that's always interesting. I will say, someone pointed it out in the chat. Matthew Golden, Mach Snell pointed it out. That was a big one. Coming in out of the portal, that's a ton of money. I guarantee you Matthew Golden was not going to be a first-round pick. He could have ran a 4.22, and I know he ran a 4.29, but there was no way he was going first round without going to Texas and being a part of the Sark offense.
Yeah. I think to me, the ideal spot for a transfer, the ideal outcome, I should say, is what happened to AD Mitchell. Like, if you look at AD coming from Georgia to Texas, like, hey, I want to, have a chance to get back to the playoff, but really up my draft profile, maybe something like around 50 catches, 750-ish yards, 10 touchdowns, and go be a first or second round pick. Like, AD Mitchell came to Texas and did exactly what he wanted to do and got the exact outcome that he wanted. So to me, I think that's awesome. But yeah, Matthew Golden well exceeded expectations. It's amazing if you look at Matthew Golden's college career, the 2 years he had competent quarterback play, when he had Clayton Tune at Houston and then Quinn at Texas. Like, it's amazing how, Matthew Golden's a really good receiver when he's got somebody competent throwing in the football. Like, imagine that. Marcus, CV was mentioning, and again, we're 20 years ago, the draft and the economics, not what it is now. Right. But considering at the time the rookie wage scale had not been instituted, when I think about being floored by draft decisions, like, I've been surprised by some. But one of your former teammates, when Roy Williams decided to come back to Texas, that one floored me, because after that Cotton Bowl game against LSU, you couldn't convince me otherwise that he was a top 5 pick in the draft. And I'm like, he's gone. Like, there's no way he's coming back. And he ended up coming back for a senior year. And I remember he went, I think, 7 overall to the Lions the next year. And I remember Michael Irvin on the draft telecast, and I'm like, what an idiot he was for coming back. Oh, he should have come out last year. Like, his stock was higher. I'm like, he's still the 7th pick in the draft. Like, it's not like he fell out of the first round. But the Roy Williams decision to come back, Marcus, was one that, floored me. I was gobsmacked. Could not believe he decided to come back.
Yeah, and that was a rare one. I mean, we've all come to hear, Roy's stories, both from his own mouth, from different teammates and stuff. But Roy just marched to the beat of his own drum, and he did things his way, right? And so As much from a true football standpoint, it was shocking. If you know Roy, it really wasn't. It was kind of one of those deals where like, oh, okay, that's Roy. It makes sense. And so I'm with you though. Like it was one where like if it was anybody else and they had done the things that he had done, especially had a bowl game, like the one that he did against LSU in, I guess that would have been the 2003 Cotton Bowl game, right? From the 2002 season. You wouldn't expect that, but it being Roy, it wasn't overly surprising to me.
January 1st, 2003. Kids, if you get a chance this summer, you're not doing anything, you're on vacation with the fam, or you're sitting around bored, you need something to do, go pull that up on the YouTube machine, Texas LSU, and go watch Roy Williams looking like he's the varsity practicing against the JV. And that's a Will Muschamp coached LSU defense with dudes like Corey Webster that played a long time in the league. Maybe the best non-Vince Young bowl performance I've ever seen in my life from a Texas player. So you got to have the caveat, though, a non-VY bowl performance because the VY stuff is on another level. Let's go ahead and get to the super chat real quick. We got another super chat from Rocky P. Rocky P, thank you for the super chat. This one's from Marcus. Marcus, as a player, how would you have handled the Sorsby situation in the locker room? How different is it for you that it's the quarterback? So we haven't talked about the Tech situation tonight, but I think this is interesting, Marcus, from the locker room standpoint.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I'll answer it because it's Rocky P. Rocky P, you're a good man, and so I want to make sure I try to give this the best answer I can. I think you look at it from a number of different perspectives, right? Like if I'm trying to put myself into a very similar situation as this one, if I'm honest, I don't have a ton of allegiancy to a guy like Sorsby yet. I mean, he just transferred in, right? So it would have been very different than if it was a guy that was truly homegrown. And so I would like to think that, for the most part, like you're not really going to come down on a teammate directly. I mean, what use is it, for me to pile on, right? Like at this point, the entire world is talking about it. And so how different is it, that it's a QB? If this were like a VY type of situation, then yeah, it would be pretty different because, I mean, he's head and shoulders our leader and was the guy that, was already proven. And I think in a situation with Sorsby, for me, as I've kind of tried to, look at it from any number of different angles, I'll just be honest with you guys. Like, I don't know how worth all the fuss is because I just am not convinced that he's like that big of a game changer. And so from a locker room standpoint, at some point as a teammate, whether it was something that, ever got voiced or was, truly a audible conversation, you have to be wondering like, man, like what are we really doing here? Right. Like all of this fuss and we're trying to get ready for, at the time, spring ball and then that leading into your summer, which, we've talked time and time again about how important those months are. And then it's going to be a continued drumbeat as you head into the fall. It's just unfortunate. It puts kind of everybody in a really bad position. And so for me, it's honestly one of those deals where you hope that somebody else would have made the decision, whether it was the school or the NCAA or, God forbid, the actual judge himself, made a ruling that kind of kept this out of, the locker room fray, if you will. And so I can't exactly tell you, how I would handle it, Rocky P, because it's one of those deals like when you're a player, you try to have your teammates back. I've had teammates that, have gotten caught up in stuff, but again, at the end of the day, there was punishment for those things, right? And so this was very unique in that there were things that were in place that, kind of showed everybody else there were consequences to your actions. Something like this is pretty much a slippery slope because it doesn't really send the signal that, you've always had sent in pretty much any locker room I've been a part of, which is if you do something that is wrong, we're going to help you through it and you don't get to play. And this one's very different in that how do you now tell the next guy, whatever his, infraction is, that, he has to miss even a game when there's a situation like this. So I know I didn't, answer that perfectly, but it's so nuanced when you think of it from a player standpoint, just because of what's actually gone down.
Good stuff, Marcus. I said we wouldn't talk about Tech, but I do have one thing that I want to get to. We'll get to that on the other side. And I want to get CJ's opinion and Marcus's opinion on it before we get out of here. And that'll be pretty much, unless we get super chats or chats to say otherwise, That'll be it for me on the tech situation. But at any rate, let's go ahead and shout out our last sponsor of the night, that being Laura Baker. Laura's been a longtime sponsor of Football Theory here on the channel. And we want to thank her for sponsoring the Wednesday night live stream. And this Wednesday night live stream is brought to you by accomplished Austin realtor Laura Baker. Laura and the Andy Allen team at Keller Williams can handle all of your real estate needs in the Austin area. Laura's not only a diehard Longhorn fan, but a longtime Austin real estate expert. So whatever your needs are in the greater Austin area, give Laura a shout at 512-784-0505. Again, that's 512-784-0505. And a big thank you to Laura Baker, not just for sponsoring Football Theory here on the channel, but for sponsoring the Wednesday night live stream here at On Texas Football. All right, I want to get to this, guys, just because Matthew did the work to put this clip together, and I want to make sure we use it before the end of the show. But, if you strip away with the Sorsby deal, if you strip away Joey McGuire and Cody Campbell and, all the higher-ups at Tech, and you just get down to the core. And, Sark's, this goes back to Sark's press conference at the Houston Touchdown Club, and you look at Sark's Ole Miss comments and his comment about Texas Tech schedule. Everybody took those and ran with it. And his answer here is in the context of talking about the Ole Miss basket weaving comment that he made, I believe, in that Matt Hayes interview. But at its core, you'll hear Sark say something that I think now everybody is really realizing that's the problem. And everybody missed the message when Sark gave it a little less than a month ago. So here's the clip again. This is Sark at the Touchdown Club of Houston at his press conference. He's talking about the Ole Miss basket weaving comment, but you'll hear him get to the heart of the matter, which I think a lot of people missed, but this is front and center now what we're talking about.
That was one of the inequalities and discrepancies that we deal with in college athletics. We are not the NFL where everything is standardized and everything is the same. We all operate under different contracts. The contracts that we can offer our players are different than the contracts you can offer in California or Louisiana or Florida, because there's 39 different state laws. We're not governed by one thing, and that's one of the major issues. That's why we're striving so hard for federal intervention that we're struggling to get, so that we can police these things in these things that we have in place. Because if not, anytime somebody does something that is against the rules, okay, and against the rules for a group that we all signed up to be part of. We all sign up to be part of the NCAA, and we agree to these rules. We make the rules. But then when we break the rule, we want to run to a judge in our hometown and get an injunction against that rule to get that player eligible. That doesn't make sense to me. We aren't policing our own rules. And so why do we need federal intervention? For that very reason. Now, we're struggling to get that done. That's why there's been all this talk of, is there potential breaking away? Could college football break away from the NCAA so that we can govern? It's not to break away to get away from everybody. It's to break away so that we can actually govern the rules that we're putting in place.
Guys, that to me, CJ, I'll start with you. It's if nothing else, this whole Sorsby situation has really reinforced the fact that the NCAA has no teeth. It's a four-letter organization, and it's a figurehead organization. And if nothing else, this is going to get us closer to where I've thought we're going to go all along, which in terms of power conference college football, them gaining autonomy, them being able to set their own rules and parameters and have their own governing body over it and an enforcement body and collective bargaining, all that stuff. It sucks that it took this for us to get there, that this is going to be the shove in that direction. But what Sark's talking about, that's exactly what should be front and center right now. If there are no rules, then what are we even doing messing with the NCAA?
We're in the lawless, wild, wild west. That's what it is. And, Sark, in a way, kind of predicted exactly what happened with Sorsby. And I'm sure maybe he knew, but at the same time, exactly what he said, where rules are broken, you find a judge, you get an injunction, now you're sitting there saying, hey, those rules don't apply to you anymore. Is that not exactly what happened? The punishment for Sorsby right now sits at 2-game suspension because that's what he put in writing and his legal team put in writing when appealing. That wasn't a suspension or a punishment handed down by the NCAA or governing body. I think anybody with their right mind would sit there and look at the bulk of the work that he did and what he did incorrectly and say, hey, that's probably worth more than 2 games. So I'm with Sark here, and it's funny. Looking back, you go find the tweets, you go find the quotes from when Sark made these exact comments, and there's fan bases across the country who are now probably advocating for the exact same thing that Sark said word for word. But at the time, it was Sark was complaining. Sark was, sitting there whining about the state of college football, whereas I think now folks are sitting there saying, oh, maybe that guy was right. And he was.
Marcus, we've gone from a world where schools had to self-report violations. Literally, and I think Oklahoma actually reported this. They had to report a violation at one point in time that a recruit on a visit had gotten too much pasta in the buffet line, so they had to self-report that as a violation. We've gone from that to coaches and athletic directors and boosters openly defending guys betting on their team committing the cardinal sin in team sports that you just don't do. I don't know where we are, Marcus, but to say the bar is in Hades would be an understatement.
Yeah, it's tough, man. Like I'm glad that we made it at least this far into the show and got a lot of the really good stuff out of the way as we're kind of wrapping this up and having this conversation. But I think you make a good point, Jeff. It's just like, what's the threshold for any of this? Where does it stop? And, hearing some of the comments that were coming, out of Texas Tech today, and, you continue to see Cody Campbell posting and talking anywhere he can. It's like, well, there's other people that have done bad things. Yeah, okay, I don't disagree with that. And this is not like the topic of conversation is this particular thing that is, universally known as the one thing you don't do, right? I'm not suggesting that, any number of other things that, student athletes engage in is better or worse, right? But I mean, some of those things don't go to kind of just that thing that we all know was just never something. I mean, even back when I was playing, right, where gambling wasn't as accessible as it is now with all the different apps and all the money that goes into it from a legal standpoint, right? They still talk to us about gambling. So like, this isn't even something that you can say a person didn't have knowledge of, all the way down to just the age old conversation of whether or not Pete Rose belongs in the Hall of Fame, right? The reason that you have a camp of people trying to keep him out is because he did the same thing that Sorsby did and there was a punishment for it. And now we're saying that doesn't matter. So it's pretty interesting, to say the least, to hear some of the conversation. And to your point, Jeff, of Sark, it's funny. One of the things I enjoy now more than anything on social media is looking at Sooners and Aggies and just people from across the SEC and just other fan bases in general. And they're like, man, y'all tried to tell us that those guys really suck, and we didn't believe you, but I hate that I'm having to agree with you now, and yet here we are. So it's that aspect of things is entertaining, but the worst of it all is just that there really are no guardrails, and at this point, it seems like anybody can do anything.
And CJ, do you have something else?
I was just going to say, Marcus, something that you said in there, I couldn't agree more. It was Cody Campbell talks to anybody that will listen, and the last thing I think from a optics perspective that Texas Tech needs right now is Cody Campbell in front of a microphone, because there's nothing he could say right now, and there was nothing he did say today that was released that is going to help Tech's, one, optics to the world of college football or college athletics as a whole, or two, is going to better the situation for Brendan Sorsby. Today he drew the comparison of, if it was LSU, they would just bat it on. I mean, no one would bat an eye. It's like, why are you trying to bring down another institution when this is your backyard that is flooded, that has all the fleas, that is looking like a rotten mess? So that's something in a way, I kind of sit there and I feel for all of the coaches on the staff who have to sit there and listen to Cody Campbell spew and Kirby Hocutt, write out an entire soliloquy of nothing basically in his statement today, where Texas Tech just continues to stub its toe when, hey, you don't have to say anything. You got the legal ruling. Trying to explain yourself isn't going to do any good, but hey, dig that grave.
Yep. Just grab that shovel and keep digging. That's exactly what Texas Tech is doing. Hey, before we get out here, we got a super chat I want to get to. But CJ, Anything recruiting, anything pertinent on recruiting? Had a couple just in general recruiting questions. A lot of Kasai Curry talk in the chat. Anything that the folks need to be kept abreast of as far as recruiting goes?
Yeah, look, a couple things. We reported earlier in the week, Caleb Seiler, the 2027 offensive lineman from Gunter, moved up his official visit from June 19th to June 12th. That's a guy to watch right now. Northwestern, Texas Tech, TCU, a couple of schools, South Carolina, Arkansas, all fighting for the 6'7" offensive lineman. He'll be on campus this week. One to watch is going to be Kyron Brown out of Amarillo, Palo Duro High, the two-time 110 hurdle state finalist is going to be on campus this weekend as well. He's someone to keep an eye on. And then Isaiah Bertola, the offensive lineman out of the West Coast, committed to Cal. Right now, not expected to make it in. I believe that was the last thing that I saw in our conversations earlier today. But Texas continuing to monitor 2027 kids. There's one right in the area that I heard that they're at least looking at. We'll see if that turns into official visits and therefore offers. But right now, Texas continuing to, I guess, approach this official visit weekend with about 11 or 12 guys coming in.
Good stuff, CJ. All right, Eric Gordon has a super chat. Eric, thank you for the super chat. Unless somebody gets one in before the buzzer, this will be our last one. It says, how do you feel? I'm assuming Texas, Eric, because we talk about matches up with Notre Dame, Oregon, Miami, or Georgia in the playoff. CJ, Marcus, either one of you guys want it, and we don't have time to break down all of these matchups for Texas. Any of you guys have any particular feeling on Texas matching up with any of these teams?
Well, I don't feel good about Georgia, and I won't feel good about Georgia until I see Texas finally beat Georgia or Ohio State, for that matter.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and that's just kind of how I sit here and I evaluate Texas on a national scale. Is it fair for this team? Probably not, but given what we've seen in the Sark tenure, it's just kind of what I have to go off of. Miami's going to remain very physical, even after losing a lot of guys to the NFL, both on the offensive line, defensive lines. They have a lot of speed, but not a lot of options, if that makes sense. Notre Dame, great quarterback. What will that quarterback look like without 2 first-round running backs? That's my big question. And then Oregon, I think Oregon, you could put Oregon up with just about anybody. If DeCorian Moore is who they believe DeCorian Moore and who I believe DeCorian Moore is, that's going to be a dangerous offense, both running the football, throwing the football. Dante Moore, I think, is in for a big year. Even after it, towards the back end of last year, a lot of folks said, hey, I'm not a believer in Dante Moore. I believe in the Oregon Ducks again this year.
Yeah, Marcus, it's hard to imagine, and a couple of people mentioned in the chat, and Highland Repshire was one. It's hard to imagine with the type of roster Sark has put together that Texas isn't going to match up well with somebody on some level. When I look at those teams, and it's no disrespect to Darian Mensah or Gunnar Stockton, but the potential of CJ Carr and Dante Moore to get closer to where their ceilings may be, that could be the difference if one of those guys could outdo Arch on a given day in a quarterfinal, semifinal championship game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I mean, I think CJ covered it really well. One of the ones that I would be interested to see the matchup, but I wouldn't overly be looking forward to it would be Notre Dame. I happen to know Leonard Moore's father really well and wouldn't really relish in the fact that, he'd be able to kind of shut down a side of the field and that give, their defense a lot to work with there. But to CJ's point, I mean, you don't just lose 2 first-round running backs and easily replace them. But you're spot on, Jeff. Those two are the quarterbacks that I'd have the most concern around them getting hot and being able to really string something together. So, but, at the end of the day, I think this team, as it's presently constructed, before, any ball has been snapped, has the talent to match up well with anybody in the country. It would just come down to how, things are on that given day and how well they've survived the season. But that applies for the other guys as well.
Yeah, CJ, Notre Dame's the team that would worry me just because you look at their schedule. They've got plenty of time to work the kinks out.
Mm-hmm.
And, Marcus mentioned Leonard Moore, CJ, like we saw it at Texas. Chris Ash's defense is a pretty complicated scheme to get down. But going into year 2 in that defense, they don't have to take that time early in the year to kind of feel things through and figure it out. Like they're going to be on it from the jump. So that's kind of what concerns me about Notre Dame is they've got a lot of runway to get right before they get to the playoff.
Yeah, very much like Texas Tech, where they probably won't be tested until late December. I mean, it's just kind of the fact of the matter when you look at the schedules, at least not multiple times, right? So the plenty of low stress, low leverage opportunities for Notre Dame to figure out what works, what doesn't, what their identity will be, and which ball players they know will step up to big moments. So yeah, Jeff, that's the luxury when you get to handpick your schedule. And it's why, hey, a lot of ADs around the country are sitting there saying, we will not schedule Texas Tech in anything. I wish they would direct that at Notre Dame until they join a conference.
If you look at when they're going to be pushed, maybe BYU on the road. You go to Provo, weird stuff can happen.
It's true.
BYU at BYU October 17th. Exactly. Nightmares from Taysom Hill still. It's funny, we're talking about Matt Jones at one point in the show. Now we're talking about Taysom Hill. So just, I don't know what it is about white running quarterbacks that just give you nightmares. Or November 7th, they host Notre Dame hosts Miami. So that would be one of the two where they'd probably be tested during the season. All right. And by the way, Marcus, since you brought him up, Rod Babers, president of the Leonard Moore fan club. Rod was on Leonard Moore long before, maybe before Notre Dame was at that point. I don't know. I'd go back and check the tape, but Rodby's been a Leonard Moore fan for a long time. All right. That's going to do it for the Wednesday night live stream. CJ, Marcus, thank you guys for the time, the knowledge, the expertise, as always. Huge thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it, doing the great job that he does, as always, the MVP of On Texas Football. Big thank you to our sponsors. That's Andy Ludicky and My Perfect Franchise, Laura Baker, and Prize Picks. Hey, if you're not a member over at OnTexasFootball.com, you need to get over to the site right now and take advantage of our limited time offer. New subscribers get $3 and get your first 3 months of access over on TexasFootball.com. One official visit weekend is in the books. As CJ said, another one on tap for this weekend. The recruiting intel, you're not getting any better recruiting intel. Nobody's doing it better in the Texas market than the staff at On Texas Football. So make sure you get over the site. Again, new subscribers, $3 for your first 3 months of access. The weekend OV intel will be worth the price of admission. Promise me. So make sure you get over to OnTexasFootball.com and check out everything we've got going on the website. Make sure before we're done that you hit that like button. Make sure that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel, and make sure you got your notifications set so that way anytime we go live or drop a new video, you're not missing any of our Longhorn coverage or breaking news. Marcus is done with live streaming for this week. I will be back with CJ and Coach Bob Shipley tomorrow on the Thursday night live stream, stepping in for Rod Babers with the Winning Drive crew. If you got any questions, comments, concerns, whatever you got, you can direct it to the guys at Coffee and Football bright and early tomorrow morning. And as always, especially to Sandman and Silver Spurs Sicko for the Wednesday night chat. Thank you guys so much for keeping the chat lively. Thank you for the super chats. It is much appreciated. And we're looking forward to doing it again with this crew again next Wednesday. So until then, for CJ, for Marcus, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, hook 'em.
For Craig.